Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to Monday Night Live and Uncut podcasts with some of the very best understated educators in the UK. Tonight, I've got Joanna Gaudoin. I think that's how you say your name, Joanna. You gave me 4 different spellings of it and ways to
Gaudoin.
Adoin. How can I say that? That's
You tried.
absolutely brilliant. Joanna's been a consultant. She's a friend of Monday Night Live. We've had her on before, and I'm really looking forward to our discussions tonight. Joanna, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And you're a bit of a stickler, aren't you, for good manners?
Yes, I am. Things get on my nerves a lot. And I think because of what I do, helping companies perform better by getting people to work on their relationships, it really annoys me when I see seemingly easy wins lost. So I have to be really careful tonight this doesn't turn into a rant. But I think it's amazing the things that can make or break your perception of individuals and the companies they work for. Just small things. We've just done a house renovation that took seemingly forever, a year and a half. It's great. It's worked out really well. And of course, you're going to get things go wrong along that journey. But for me, it's about how individuals and the companies those individuals work for deal with those issues. And we had one company that something went very wrong. They essentially gave us they missed out on instruction for the worktop. So the builders installed the kitchen cabinetry, and then the guy came to measure for the worktop and stuff had to be moved, which was quite a big deal. Fortunately, we had the space and whatever, but it meant it knocked all the timing out for the whole worktop. And I did have to do quite a lot of persuading and difficult conversations on the phone, but ultimately that company firstly paid for the builders to their time to move the cabinets because they hadn't given us the right instruction. And then they created our worktop in 2 days rather than 9 to still meet the timeline. So for me, that's business. I now recommend them because they turned something around really well. The guy even called me from his elderly mum's house one evening to make sure things were getting sorted. So I think that was a very good example. And then there are less good ones, like the furniture company that came to pick something up, never turned up, lied, kept saying they were on their way, never turned up that night, had to push them to come the next day, and then sent guys who didn't know what they were doing, and they damaged a wall, damaged a door, tried to shove it through a doorway it was never going to fit. And yes, I did get my money back for the service, but they said they'd give me some compensation and then just went AWOL and never did. So definitely would be writing a negative, well, I did write a negative Google review. But so I think there's often a difference between tradespeople, and I think those of us in professional life, we have slightly different expectations. And I think the companies that do really well, the trades companies, are the ones that realise, not to sound snooty, that professional people have a slightly different expectation of communication and how to deal with things. But I think even in professional services, we see a lot of issues. I mean, it was a small thing, but last week I was at a lunch, and this lunch you're on a preset table after some networking, and it was 8 people on this table, and I sat down, see, I'm one half of 4, and the guys opposite me didn't even acknowledge myself and the other guy opposite them, which I thought was a bit rude. Even if you're talking, all you have to do is look up, right? And it is a networking event. And then they sort of just talked to each other, which was fine. We started talking to each other. But then, one of them just picked up the wine bottle, just served himself, didn't even look at other people. Do they want some offer? I just thought, yeah, that small thing, there's a danger that sets the tone for how we respond to that person. I now in my mind, rightly or wrongly, you might say it's quick, it's judgmental, but it's what we do, unfortunately, as humans, partly to protect ourselves. It's that learning friend or foe loop. I'm thinking, oh, what a selfish guy. Why would I engage with you just because he didn't offer anyone else a drink? So my point with this is we all get annoyed by different things, I think. And it could be a really small behaviour, but it could ultimately stop you forming a relationship that could be beneficial for your career or for your business. And that's what I think. None of us are perfect, but we do have to think about that.
Tell me, how annoyed do you get? You used the word rant before. I sort of got the impression I wouldn't want to be on the end of a phone call from you.
No, I think I'm fairly assertive, and that you may remember, if any of you were on here last time I was, my dad was actually on here last time as well, because he worked like you, Derek, at Barclays for 35 years. And I was living at his house because we were having that work done last time I was on here. He's not on here today, he's in Switzerland today. But I think I get it from him because he's an ops director. He's got really high standards. So I grew up with listening to him, write constructive complaints. He told me last week he'd finally won a battle with an energy company for his friend. She'd been massively overcharged and he'd been helping her get the money back, and he finally won that one. So I think he sees it as fun now he's retired. I wouldn't say I yet see it as fun because I've got lots of other better things to be doing. So I think it's from that, and I hope I'm fair. When someone does a really good job, I write them a great Google review, particularly if they're a small business. On our street WhatsApp group, people have obviously seen all the work we've had done. I've said, if anyone needs a good whatever, let me know. I'll pass their names on, not for the ones that didn't do such a good job. So I hope it's fair and reasonable. And I think it's just such a shame because the companies, individuals get such small things that are easy to fix wrong. And I think you told me about the book the other week, Derek. Complaint is a gift because it gives you an opportunity to see your business in a way other people don't, and to act on that.
Yeah, we had Janelle Barlow on from New Mexico, and she's written a book. Complaint is a gift, and
That was it. Yeah.
She's always looked at complaints and how you handle them, almost in the same arena as you, but not quite. Not quite.
Yeah. So I think and I spend a lot of my time, ultimately, my job, my company is all about helping professional services build better relationships internally and externally. So I spend a lot of the time getting people to think about, how could someone else see this situation? What do you need to do? Just notice Mark Lee. Hello, Mark. Haven't seen you for ages. And the bottom smiling at me. And that's really important. Of course, we see things from our own perspective, but we need to think about, how could someone else perceive this, that doesn't know my reasons, my beliefs, my assumptions. It's fascinating, actually. Tomorrow I'm going to lead a half-day workshop. Got to get up very early to get myself right into Oxfordshire, on having difficult conversations. And I was meant to lead this session back in March. Unfortunately, I think I got COVID. I didn't test, but I was extremely sick, so I couldn't do it. So we've only just rearranged it for now. So I touched base with the business, the person running the business, to say to him, anything I need to know. It's 3-4 months since we were going to do this. Any updates, anything I need to be aware of. And I did that for 2 reasons. Probably the first reason was I want him to think I'm really bothered about the work I'm going to do tomorrow. And also, is there genuinely anything I need to be aware of? And he sent me a list of some very difficult happenings since then, and all internal gripes and relationship difficulties. But there's no doubt, in that sort of culture, with those sort of things going on, some of it seemingly from the list sounds quite petty, that's going to be impacting how they're delivering to clients. And if clients get a sense of, oh, it's not going so well there, then they're less likely to stay and be loyal. They're more likely to go, obviously, and not refer people, certainly not bring more work. So these things matter internally and externally.
Yeah, you talk about perceptions, don't you? Is that one of the things you do on your workshops, getting people to look at different perceptions?
Yeah, to think about, how could this be perceived, without knowledge of my motivational why. So I often use the example, if you go to a meeting and one of your peers is continually trying to, speak up, push in, seemingly really step up, you could be feeling, oh, that's a bit pushy, that's not so great. But what you don't know is perhaps your boss has asked them to do that. So we always have to have this benefit of that. What do I not know here? What information am I missing? What do they know, believe, think? And what might I need to know, believe, think that could make me think or act the way they do? So it's always trying to make sure we look at that lens. And just telling you earlier, Derek, I've got a big complaint in with a unspecified organisation at the moment. I wrote them big email yesterday, and I've got my dad to review as well to put some other eyes on it. And I keep trying to think, why on earth would this company be doing this? What am I not seeing? And it's still not giving me an answer, but I think we always have to ask that question of ourselves.
And do you always get an answer to these? Because I think people tend to ignore emails, don't they? I mean, I was telling my client on Friday that just to send the email again and say it's been caught by the spam police or something like that. Don't rewrite it or don't chase them. Just resend it. Keep resending it. But
Yeah, I think the power of a phone call can't be underestimated. I know recently, just I help a lot of law firms with their business development. And you do have to keep staying in touch with people. And you sometimes feel like that sort of little voice on your shoulder, you're being a pain, emailing somebody again. So recently I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try the old-fashioned phone, because a lot of people don't use the phone anymore. And you've got to be careful how you do that. Call somebody up and say, oh, have you got 5 minutes? Set the expectation of how much I'm calling is to follow up on our conversation. And actually that's worked really well. That's got me 2 or 3 meetings recently that I don't think I would have got if I'd kept on the email. So, I mean, what's interesting about this particular complaint is it's very heavily guarded. All you hit is the very pleasant, lovely, actually very courteous customer services team, but they are absolutely powerless and can't make any decisions. And then you just can't get through to people and make a decision. So we'll see. I've written this email. I've given them a deadline of end of Thursday. Otherwise, email to the CEO is next. And I've found someone on LinkedIn who's connected to him, so I will. And it is actually something I would actually go to social media and the press on. They're actually doing something quite immoral, post office-esque on a smaller scale. So we'll see, won't we?
Now, I hadn't thought about using LinkedIn to complain. I've got an issue as well.
Yeah.
But, let's not talk about that. But yeah, you can get at people. I've already made a note of that. Right, I'm going to use LinkedIn.
Yeah, you have to be super careful, because the last thing I want is my network, who I'm ultimately trying to, engage and do business with, to think I'm just a ranty whatnot. I don't want that perception of me being out there, but it can be useful. I mean, 2 years ago, my mother-in-law sadly died of cancer, and we had to cancel our holiday. And simple thing, EasyJet refunded the tax, and I needed to claim the rest of the flights off the travel insurance, and all I needed from them was literally an invoice showing what we'd paid. Oh my goodness, the number of messages, you couldn't download it online. And I just put a call out, does anyone happen to know someone at EasyJet that works in whatever? I had lots of people in my network kindly offer advice, and one gave me a name and his email address, emailed him, he sorted it in 6 hours.
Wow.
So I think you have to be careful with your perception on there, but it can, if you position it well, you absolutely can solve your own issue with companies, I think.
I've written that one down. That's 2 tips you give me already. That's fantastic. So yeah, no. And now you sent me a survey, didn't you? And you asked me to look at it, a customer satisfaction survey. I think it was lawyers and accountants, and there was some surprising statistics in there.
Oh, there's a company actually, they do a little bit of what I do. I'm trying to speak to them because they did a very good presentation at a law firm conference that I attended. They're called Insight 6. You might know them, Mark, actually. Run by Jonathan Wheatley, I think. And they are all about customer experience, which I think, from what you've heard me say, I'm really passionate about. And I think it should be an easy win for a lot of companies. And yeah, the stats in that report were quite shocking. They were looking at different sectors like accountancy, legal, and some other professional services. And how few inquiries even got a response. So if someone they essentially go around doing mystery shopping. So they, will call up a law firm or accountancy practice or send in an inquiry on the website. And the percentages that got responded to were shockingly low. And you just think, wow, these firms are throwing business away. You know, that's people that are proactively coming to you. You don't even have to do any work. You just have to respond. You're not trying to go out and market yourself, and you do all this marketing and then you don't even bother to respond to the people that are coming. It's pretty shocking. So I am actually going to try and talk to Jonathan, because I want, I'm interested in his work, whether there's any ways we could collaborate, because I'm really passionate about helping companies do the best job they can. And I've recently done a sort of got into a new area. It's a growth of what I've been doing before, but helping lawyers with their business development skills. And whereas I typically work with larger firms, and I still do, running standalone sessions or short programs, I've started doing business development for mid-tier firms. And that means getting to look at what have you got in place that you need for BD to work. Do your lawyers fundamentally understand they're an important part of that, even if they're not a partner? What could they be doing to contribute to that effort? And so there's two sides to that. There's developing new business, and then servicing your existing clients really well, so you're developing them and they want to stay loyal and come back and refer their friends and all that stuff. So I'm really passionate about that, because there's some great firms out there doing amazing work when they actually get the clients, but then not making the most of that, and developing that.
Didn't I see something like it was only 35% or 40% of the inquiries got answered, or something
Yeah,
crazy?
it's really low. I haven't actually got the report in front of me. I can try and dig it out. But I was really shocked. I'm really, really shocked, because I just think, really? And I know I am pretty much just me. I have I have an assistant and various other people doing things for me. But that's a top priority. If I get a contact form coming in, or a email inquiring, or a LinkedIn message, I am on that very quickly, because otherwise, what's the perception you're forming? And if you're not responsive when you're trying to make a sale, then you're not going to be, that sets the expectation, well, you're not going to be great when you've actually won the work.
It tells you a lot about the company you're doing business with. If they don't respond, you don't really want to do business with them, do you? That would be my common sense approach.
Well, exactly. And it was when we moved house 2.5 years ago, and we were looking for a conveyancing solicitor. The estate agents recommended some, so I thought, well, that's a good start. So I contacted, I can't remember, 3 or 4 of them, and got their fees essentially. Um, and after that, what I did was, honestly, they were all quite similar. I think one was a lot more money or something. I called up the top 3 that I was interested in, and just tested, did they answer the phone? Could I actually have didn't want a long conversation, but a quick conversation with the actual solicitor who'd be doing the work, get a feel for whether they'd be responsive, and that's the basis on which I chose. But I'm just pulling up what you were referring to here, and I think what it says is that was it 41? This is accountancy, so Mark might like this. 41% of phone calls either are or aren't referred to, but whichever way, it's not great, is it? And likewise, internet inquiries 37% and messages 41%. It's not a chart's not very clear actually whether that's responded to or not, but either way, it's not great. What that shows us, and that it fades out in time. So that, for instance, on the phone, it might be initially they get contacted, but then the follow-up, I think, once they'd spoken to, say, an accountant, was 5%. So that means 95% of accountants weren't then saying, lovely to speak to you, I'd be delighted to discuss further, or here's the brochure, or here's the whatever, and offer that follow-up. So it just looks like you don't really care. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
I think that is often the case. It's, in my experience, lawyers and accountants don't care in a way. They don't care about the follow-up. They expect a business to walk in. I don't mean the partners. I mean the people that perhaps do the work. Certainly, I've had that experience.
fee earners, and
Mark Lee's working on that as well, so it is interesting. A friend of mine ran a solicitor's practice in Guildford, and he couldn't get any of the solicitors that weren't partners to do any business development, any networking, or anything
Well, he
frankly,
needs me to come and help. Is he still going?
no, no, that's another story. Don't go there. I tried to help him, but he wasn't listening, which happens in a number of cases as well.
Mm.
Actually,
Mm.
especially with a law firm where they've got professional indemnity rolls on for about 10 years as well. So there's all sorts of unseen issues.
Mm.
Now we talked
About the
about
good
small things that make a massive difference, and I think you've got a few examples of small things that make a massive difference, which turn the clients off.
Mm. Yeah, I think I immediately am thinking of my tradespeople recently. I mean, the wine bottle one I gave you was a good one last week. There's Derek reminded me of it earlier. Networking. If someone, I call it the business card hand stab. When they're trying to shove a card in your hand before they've barely said hello. Are you ever going to call that person? No, and you just stood there. Like, what am I meant to do with this? So there's many things. We just had our driveway and patio done as one of the final things, and those guys were excellent. They would tell us who's coming the next day, if they'd let us know if they were going to be late or if the weather wasn't great. Or they actually one day it was chucking it down. They turned up anyway just to tell me they would be back later. So they were exceptional company. It'd be good to know in a bit from other people what do you notice, because I think some things annoy some people more than others. So therefore you can't take the risk. You've got to always be thinking, well, how could this negatively impact somebody?
Sure, if anyone's got any small things that really annoy them or they have a rant about, please put them in the chat box and we'll take a look at them. We talked about office politics last time we spoke. Do you think they've got better? And I think you told me office politics is worse in the charity sector than anywhere else.
No, I think office politics is a massive issue at the moment. I think there's a whole mix of things there and reasons why. I think hybrid working has caused I won't use a real rude word, but a real bad storm of things. Because what we've got, I should say very clearly, I think hybrid working is a really good thing. I think as long as you use the time well and you communicate well with your colleagues and businesses work on their cultures, it can work really well. But the problem we've got is people hiding at home thinking, oh, that John I don't like in the office. Sorry if there's anyone called John on the call. I only have to see him once every 2 weeks. Sorry, John. It's John with an H. It's fine. I can just forget about that problem, not worry about that relationship. And that's not a good thing. So that's one issue, people avoiding difficult situations. And I always say there are two criteria for raising a difficult conversation. One is if it's something really enormous that's having an ongoing impact, whether that's on you personally and you're going to keep remembering it, or the business, or it's something that's likely to be repeated. You're not going to raise every single annoyance with your colleagues all the time. That would not be good and productive and positive. But we've got a lot of avoidance going on. And also people at home, who are maybe imagining things are going on behind their back in the office that maybe are or aren't, as well as the ignoring factor. So I think we've got a whole load of office politics stirring up a lot worse, actually. And certainly from the problems I told you about earlier for my workshop tomorrow, I don't know how much they're working virtually versus in the office, but I would bet that's a contributing factor. But the problem is, and I speak on office politics a lot, and I'm just thinking about how I almost rename it in trying to position it as a speaker. Organisations don't like to think they've got a problem with it. So actually it makes it hard for me to sell in myself as a speaker. So I've actually you asked me, Derek, actually earlier, had I used AI for anything? And I'm a tentative AI at the moment, but actually was playing around with it to think about what else could I call this talk to get people to have me come in and talk at their town hall, their away day on this topic, because it's so important. And there's office politics everywhere. It's about how positive or negative it is. But if you don't address it, fundamentally, you'll get people off sick, people leaving. Retention's a real problem at the moment of decent talent. You'll get low productivity. You'll get poor decision making, general overall poor workplace culture. And all of that, as I said earlier, will impact the clients. So I am really concerned, about this. I think it's a big problem. And certainly there was a big survey done by a colleague of mine last year, and she focused on women. I think she's doing it again this year for men, on why do people leave organisations. And a lot of it is to do with the culture, and particularly just in their team, their boss. So if there's a negative culture, it doesn't even mean it's across the whole company or firm. It can just be in a department. So people say, oh, it's the responsibility of the overall leaders. Well, yes, they do have a big responsibility in this area, but actually individual teams can change cultures. We can never change anyone else's behavior except by changing our own. So thinking about, what am I putting out there? What are my assumptions, my beliefs, and what do I need to take, differently to the workplace?
Do you think office politics are worse with men or worse with women, or do you think that there's no difference?
That's an interesting one. The guy who trained me in office politics has, ironically, clearly had an issue with the guy he ran the business with before, and has set up a slightly different thing. And what he's done is he's developed a new diagnostic tool for women specifically. I personally think women struggle to deal with it more. This is a real gender stereotype here. I think men deal with it often more naturally. Women struggle a bit with it, but there's a lot of avoidance going on. I think now is the main issue. So we'll see how that pans out.
No, I can see working from home, and would you have a face-to-face conversation with someone that was difficult on Zoom? That's interesting, isn't it? I wouldn't be very keen on it, but you might have to rather than avoid it. And how
Yeah, you might have to. Yeah, it's better than not. But if you're, across the globe and it's hard to, whether, then you're going to have to. But I would always suggest in person, when I'm talking to someone about handling the stuff, in person's much better. You can read far more from the body language. You think you can see barely anything of me. Yeah, and it's just easier to create some rapport. You can offer to make them a cup of tea. It's just more human things you can do in that interaction.
Now, I want to ask you about meetings. We're nearly out of time, but let's talk about meetings. Last time you said that there was some research that most meetings were a total waste of time.
I'd forgotten I'd said that, but yeah, I still do believe that. And there was a good stat I gave you, I know. Yeah.
Well, they were, I think it was 23 days of meetings a year was the average, and 13 days of the meetings were a waste of time. And then I think you said, and this is a brave one for anyone working in a company for a boss who calls meetings all the time, you said that people shouldn't go to meetings unless they knew what the meeting was all about, what they were supposed to do, and what the outcome of the meeting was, which I totally agree with, but it's tricky with office politics. What's your latest thinking on that?
I think, you can have that conversation about, but having a good relationship with the people that are regularly calling these meetings, because if they trust you, you've built that trust, that connection, that relationship, then you calling them up to say, just thinking about this meeting on Thursday, Janine, I'm quite crunched for time. I want to be really sure if I'm there, it's a good use of my time and I'm bringing real value. It's all about positioning it so that it looks beneficial for the other person, not to be manipulative, but just, what's good for that. And, or can you send someone in your team rather than going yourself? Just looking at that, because surely time efficiency is helpful for everyone. I know of so many people, my friends, as well as people through work, that literally spend all day on meetings and then do their work in the evening. And it's nuts. And the problem is with the working at home, people think you can just go back to back to back to back because you haven't even got to move rooms. Never mind, you might want to get a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, have some lunch, or even, dare I say, get some headspace so you actually can bring something valuable to the meeting rather than still thinking about the one that only finished 2 minutes ago on the last Teams call. So I think there's got to be a lot of thinking about that, and particularly if you're just sat on those sort of calls when you're in the office. So that's what I mean about making good use of your time on the days you're at home versus in the office. And I think individual teams have to think about that. You get company-wide policies, which can be okay as a guidance and a framework, but teams have different functions. So it's thinking about, well, what works for our team and how do we make the best of this working together?
So many companies talk about mental health, and we respect people's mental health, and then they go from meeting to meeting with office politics involved. And I guess, and what's your take on that? That's a cause of a lot of mental health issues at the moment.
Yeah, people just overworked. It was interesting the other day. I saw an interview at another legal conference with 3 younger lawyers, which was fascinating because I get asked all the time, "Oh, how do we solve these intergenerational issues?" And one of the guys up there, he said that basically every one of his friends on his cohort from law school had had some sort of mental health issue since COVID. I was flabbergasted that, literally pretty much everyone. Now, there's loads of reasons behind that I'm absolutely not qualified to speak on, but you do get a lot of companies that say, they do the talk of, oh, we're bothered about mental health, but it's like rob Peter to pay Paul. We're doing these wellness groups where you can do yoga on a Thursday at 5 o'clock or whatever, but but we also want you to do all of this. And I think the younger generation are pushing back. And I think arguably when I graduated, which was over 20 years ago now, everyone was quite work obsessed. You worked the hours. I had a lot of friends that went to Deloitte, did audit, that sort of stuff. And it was arguably too far one way. I think there's a bit of an issue now. It's almost gone the other way. We've mentioned a whole different topic here of the younger generation being really bothered about their work-life balance, their mental health, and how do we get a balance of that? And I don't have an answer for that. But for me, it's about strong cultures, building good teams, building great relationships. Often when people say, oh, got this issue, what's a quick win for that? I'm like, you just need to work on the relationship with that person so you understand them better and try and work through the challenge. There's no blunt instrument that's a resolution to these problems without working on the relationships with the people.
And listening seems to be the most important thing about that, and that's what people aren't very good about. We've got a minute left. Tell me about how you handle intergenerational issues, because people obviously ask you about that, and you must have people that are old enough to be someone's grandfather still working in the firm.
Yeah, definitely. It's really what I just said about listening to one another and building the relationship. There was a law firm I was working with, and I think they'd run a day where the older generation had taught the younger generation how to use the phone, which to many of us probably sounds absolutely ridiculous. But when it was good to use the phone, how you might actually do that, such as what I said earlier about asking people, do you have 5 minutes, setting that expectation. And the younger generation helped the older generations with social media, like using LinkedIn well. So that was great because it was building the relationship, was showing both have value to offer. And that's the challenge. It's finding where is the value in the different generations, because there will be some, you're always going to get generations aren't going to have complete harmony, or it was better in my day and all that stuff. I hear this a lot from my dad about he thinks everyone should be in the office all the time in a suit and tie. And I've tried explaining why that's not really, the thing now, Dad. And, there are benefits to being a bit different, but it's just finding what are the best bits of all of it from different generations.
I was going to say, being in the office all the time, your dad probably doesn't realise that people have bought houses in Cornwall, on the Scilly Isles, and all sorts of places now. So those things probably don't work very well. Although, I've heard of people insisting people have got to be in the office. So that's interesting.
Do there is more of it. I think people are actually wanting to go back to the office a bit more. I am hearing that, and firms are asking them to. So I do think, I don't think it's ever going to go back to what it was pre-pandemic, but I think a bit it will. And I've heard of quite a few people who want to relocate back to London because they've realised that, Salisbury or the Dorset coast are not the best to be going to London 3 times a week.
Yes, statistically, the railways are up to about 82% capacity compared with what they were in COVID. And whenever I'm in London, the tube in the underground is hugely busy.
Yeah,
Hugely busy.
It is. Even the Friday before last, I don't often go in on a Friday because people don't normally want me to do stuff. But I was up there. I can't remember why now. I could not. Oh, conference. That's right. Speaker conference. I could not believe how busy the tube was at 5 o'clock for the Jubilee and the Northern Line. It was like it used to be in the middle of the week, and it wasn't people going out. It was people clearly coming home from work or something. So,
Crossed my mind at that point, what would it be like if the other 20% came in on a Friday? But there we are. Joanna, that's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming and rejoining us on Monday Night Live. Perhaps you'll come back again and tell us about the questions that you were asked on these difficult conversations, because there's a lot of books about difficult conversations, but
yeah, I
that's
actually
the
think
area.
a couple of the issues on it. I've asked if the guy, I think I need to check if he's the business owner or the team lead. I've asked if he's got some time afterwards, because actually a couple of the issues, I think he's probably avoiding giving constructive feedback. And so I need to talk to him one-to-one about that. And you could class that as a difficult conversation. And lots of people fear that. Just really quickly, on that project I did trying to upskill more junior lawyers, so the non-partner fee earners, to do BD. I found out a lot of the problem in the culture there was that the 14 partners, not one of them was really any good at giving constructive feedback. So I ran a workshop for them just on that. And when I asked them, so it might seem an obvious question, what's your worry with doing it? And it wasn't even they'll leave first. That was one of them. But at first came out that I'll ruin the culture of our firm. And the other one was that they won't like me, which I thought was really interesting from 14 law firm partners. It's just not the thing you expect to hear. So I'm hoping that that workshop has made them a bit braver with constructive feedback, because none of us can grow and develop without it. So I think actually a couple of the points this guy sent me are about him having quite a direct conversation with the people or person involved. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The same happens with negotiation skills, actually. The reason people don't like negotiating, and this applies particularly to accountants and lawyers again, was they didn't like the difficult conversation about the so here's my fee, take it or leave it, or pay up or we'll sue you. And I'm not quite sure that's the best way to get business in the future, but there where we are. And of course, a negotiation is a difficult conversation, so it depends how you tackle it, doesn't it? Joanna, thanks for
Yeah,
joining us on Monday Night Live. If people
you're
want
welcome.
to get hold of your book, it's a fabulous book, Getting On Making Work Work. That's an interesting title as well. That's on Amazon. I just looked it up, and I hope you'll join us again. Good luck with your difficult conversations tomorrow.
Thank you. Hopefully I'll come out alive.
Hopefully, I think you will after your ranting for the complaints. See you soon.
See you. Thanks, Derek.